Good morning. My name is Jennifer Ryan, and on behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. This webinar is the beginning of our four-part educational series on financial acumen. Today is titled Through the Lens, Focus In on Budgeting, will last approximately 1 hour and is a pre-recorded webinar being broadcasted today, Thursday, February 18th, 2021. Before we get started, I would like to thank our 2021 corporate sponsors for their support on hosting such events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to affect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, support, mentoring, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can all learn from and support each other. Be sure to head to the AWWC website for all upcoming virtual events. Our theme this year is Through the Lens, which will allow us to take different topics each month and focus on specific conversations that will bring value to our audiences. Today, we join Nicole Sauk, Chief Financial Officer at Ametros, and one of our Boston ambassadors, along with Andrea Mills and Dorthy Cantiello, as we focus in on budgeting. Nicole has over a decade of operational and finance management experience. Prior to Ametros, she worked in public accounting as an Audit Associate and then entered the workers' compensation space as the accounting manager for ISO Claims Partners. She was and continues to be instrumental in new product launches, system enhancements, and operations. Andrea Mills is the Vice President of Account Management at Ametros and focuses on growing business and partnering with clients to find solutions that best fit their needs or solve problems. She has been in the workers' compensation space for over 10 years, starting her career as a marketer for a case management company and transitioning to a sales role for a large provider of ancillary services in the work comp space. Dorthy Cantiello has 15 years of experience in the accounting field and currently works as the assistant controller for One Call, handling the DME, home health, transportation, translation, and dental product lines. Prior to her 7 years in workers' compensation industry, she worked for PSS World Medical as an assistant controller for the Shared Services Division and as a controller for Advanced Coding Technologies. With the beginning of the year past us, business leaders are digging into understanding their budget and its projected revenue expenses. We will review elements of the budget which will help you examine what you earn and how you are spending that income. The budget drives business decisions. Managing a budget will impact business performance. Opportunities to grow new products and service along with staffing models are impacted by the budget. To start our financial acumen learning series, join us for a conversation digging into budget. Thank you for your time you're spending with us today, and we hope you enjoy this webinar.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us this morning. We are so excited to be bringing you the first webinar in a four-part series that will take you all on a journey through the financial planning process, including budgeting, business prioritization, decision-making and ROI, and then lastly, walking you through the components of financial statements with a focus on the profit and loss statement or the P&L. So since it's American Heart Health Month, we thought starting off the conversation about budgeting would be a great way to kind of start off this series, since it really could be said that the budget is, comparable to the pulse of a company. In this session, you'll get an overview of some budgeting basics from me to kind of kick us off. And then I brought along with me two of my colleagues to help share their perspectives on budgeting from their respective roles. So first, to introduce myself, I'm Nicole Sauk and I'm the CFO at Ametros. I've worked in workers' compensation for a little over 10 years now, always in the capacity of a finance or accounting type of a role. I got involved with the Alliance about 2 years ago, also doing a financial acumen type educational series. And I really was attracted to the mission of the Alliance, of the advancement of women in this industry through networking and education. And I'm really happy to get to have another opportunity here to help that message with these financial acumen series. So to kind of toss it over here and introduce you to my colleagues, I wanted to introduce you to both Andrea Mills and Dorthy Cantiello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea. I'm the Vice President of Account Management at Ametros. I've been in workers' comp for about 15 years now. And this is my first Alliance webinar presenting, but I've been to several Alliance meetings and very excited to be a part of this. And, thanks to Nicole for inviting me along.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dorthy Cantiello. I work for OneCall. I'm the assistant controller, and I've been there for 7 years now, but in the assistant controller role for about 15. And I worked with Andrea previously, and she brought me in, and I'm getting myself involved in the Alliance, and I'm definitely excited and happy to be here.
All right, thanks, ladies. So let's get started. So we just welcomed in a new year, which means that it's highly likely that your company just rolled out their new budget for 2021. Essentially, what a budget does is it helps frame the expectations for financial performance for the business for the coming year or years. So you can either be looking for just 1 year if it's a maybe fast growing or startup type company. And oftentimes budgets actually can look out as far as 5 or even 10 years if it's a company that's been established and it's a lot more predictable. You might not actually get to have direct interaction in the planning, but whether you're in a leadership position in sales, or you're an adjuster, or you're in customer service, you are all part of the budgeting process, even if you really never get to see that direct outpoint. Those that aren't actively involved in creating or managing the budget likely hear about it in the context of that's not a budgeted expense, or we're pacing at 90% of budget this year so far, or we're expected to grow the business 25% year over year. Throughout the course of the webinar, Andrea, Dorothy, and myself will kind of give a glimpse into why we have budgets, how they're created, and then we'll define some of the common buzzwords and phrases that we hear too when talking about budgets, or goals, quotas, and forecasts for our business. And hopefully we'll help squash some of the negative connotations that go along with budgeting as well, because it's not really a tool that's just meant for businesses to say no. So budgeting for business is very similar to how we plan for our own personal finances. So although we may not all be crazy people like me that kind of put together spreadsheets laying out all of our monthly income and our expenses, in some way we all do think about how much money we earn each month and how much we spend. And it's really important for us to understand our incoming and outgoing cash so that we can kind of help plan for the future. So the future could be anything in terms of, is there a big trip that you'd like to go on later in the year that you need to save up for? Or, it could be something as big as, are you saving to buy a house or for your kids' college education? And it could even be like saving up for a great pair of shoes that you've had your eyes on. When we have these plans for our income that are kind of outside of the ordinary, sometimes we need to take a step back and assess our spending. So we may need to make some adjustments to how much we spend so that we can kind of squirrel away a little bit extra each month so that we can reach those goals, whether they're big goals or small goals. So if we take a look, at our spreadsheets or at our bank statements, we know that there are certain things that we cannot cut back on. So for example, you can't cut back on your rent or your mortgage payments or your utility bills for the most part, or like gas for our cars to get to work every day. And those types of expenses that you really can't cut back on, those are called fixed costs. And then outside of the fixed costs, we have other expenses like our daily trips to Starbucks or our wardrobes, or what we spend on dining out or takeout or entertainment. Those things are considered variable costs. And those are the ones that we're able to adjust. So for example, as we're thinking about our savings goals or our goals for the future, we can start to kind of make a plan. So for example, we could make a plan that says we're going to kind of cut back on our Starbucks, our daily Starbucks trips, right? I'll make my coffee at home in the morning instead of that daily trip to Starbucks, and I'll save myself $25 a week. We could also make the decision to, do more grocery shopping and cook at home more and kind of cut back on the takeout and the dining. And instead of doing that twice a week, we would do that once a week to help kind of save some additional money. And it's these types of adjustments that really can help us reach our savings goals. However, if you're someone that really has a hard time cutting back on spending, or you're already kind of thin in your spending, you're already very frugal, an alternative to that is to find ways to increase our income. So we can't immediately change how much money we receive in our paychecks each month. It's not like you can walk into your boss's office and say, hey, I really want this pair of shoes. Can you guys give me a raise so I can make that happen? But what you could do is you could make the decision to pick up a part-time job to help supplement your income if your time and your schedule affords you that. And that can kind of help you get to that goal. And then there are those that are incredibly motivated and do both. So they might increase their income and get that second job while also cutting back on their variable spend. And that'll just help them get to their goals even faster. And these are all plans that you kind of start off with one thing in mind, but over the course of your kind of savings journey, those plans might change and you have to be flexible and adjust for unknown things that pop up, like your water heater might break, or you might need a new furnace, or you need a new roof on your house. And those are things that you have to be able to take a step back and realize, all right, I'm going to press pause on this existing plan because now I've got a new plan that's in place. So all of these things that happen in our personal lives directly correlate to how we think about budgeting for a business. The income and savings in our personal lives translates into revenue and earnings in the business world. That second job that we might take on is like a business adding a new product offering or a new line of revenue. And in business, we also have fixed and variable costs as well. The only difference is that instead of increasing our revenue and decreasing our expenses for some sort of an unplanned expense or a trip, businesses are driving revenue growth and making their costs more efficient so that they can ensure there's sufficient cash to fund the business, as well as show stronger earnings at the end of the year. All right, so let's dig into all of these different components just a little bit more here. So revenue, what is revenue? Revenue is what is generated by the sales of goods or services and services in the normal course of business. And this is often referred to as your top line. And the reason that it's called your top line is because when you're looking at a P&L or a profit and loss statement, it is the very first thing that you'll see there is your revenue. So in the budgeting process, at least in my experience, this is kind of the starting point. And this process usually starts in the prior year. So we started in Q4, and what we do is we kind of look at each of our lines of revenue and we start to evaluate how are we performing so far this year, where do we think we'll end the year, and then we use that end of year performance as a starting point to figure out what we think we can do in the next year plus. We also have to understand what we think the company's goals are for the year. So sometimes there's an overall growth percentage that a company is striving for, which kind of ties back to that buzz phrase that we hear every now and again. We're budgeted to grow top line growth, X% year over year. And then other times the growth in revenue is determined not so much based off of a specific target in mind, but it's determined based off of just what we know about our existing contracts and our business pipeline. So, in a lot of businesses, because they're contract-based or very customer-driven, will actually budget out their business by client. So they'll take, lots and lots of spreadsheets, and I live in that world, but they'll take a spreadsheet and they'll look at each client and see how each of those ones are doing. Hopefully they have an understanding of what the potential is for that particular client. And they'll use all of that knowledge to help plan out what they think that client will be able to do for them in the next year. And this particular process here is often tied to the creation of your future quota or your sales goals for your sales teams. So once all of that existing business is evaluated and the growth from that portion is figured out, the business then needs to make a decision about growing the business just beyond those existing clients and products. And we'll dig into that a little bit more later in the session. All right, so now that we've learned a bit about revenue, we're going to move on to the expense side. So again, within a P&L, it starts with your revenue, and then it moves down to your cost of sales, your sales and general admin expenses, and then that eventually gets us down to earnings. So within your cost of sales and your SG&A, those are all considered your expenses, and that's where both the fixed and your variable expenses lived. So in the business world, your fixed costs are the expenses that are needed to run the business that aren't flexible. So very similar as to in your personal life, this includes items like rent and utilities. Also in this bucket can be items like your business insurance, the cost of equipment and software needed to run the business, and then even certain individuals and functions like HR and accounting and your legal team. When budgeting, the fixed costs are really the most easily identified. So we already know what we need, and we essentially, we take what we did in the prior year and we roll those into the new year, and we just make sure that we incorporate any built-in price increases for those non-flexible expenses. And then on the flip side are your variable expenses. So these are the ones that will change based off of what the company targets are for growing top line growth and earnings. So for example, if you're trying to accelerate your top line growth, meaning you're trying to grow your revenue by a significant amount year over year, you may need to add several new sales or account management hires into the plan for the year that's going to help you get there. Also considered within this bucket isn't just the actual people, but all of the costs that are tied to those people as well. So for example, for a sales or account management group, this would include the travel and entertainment costs generated by that team as well. And if your revenue is growing, then that means that the cost of that revenue or the cost of goods sold will also need to increase accordingly. So the company that I work for is a service business, and our revenue growth is driven by increasing memberships on our platform. So since memberships are our revenue, we need to make sure that we have the right number of customer service reps in place to take care of those members. So within our budget model, we have a calculation that essentially tells us each month, based off of the expected members that we bring in, how many hires we need to service those members. And it's very formulaic, and it just kind of lays it out for the year based off of that growth. And then as we go through the year, if we are either exceeding or missing that growth, we can make adjustments to those variable costs as needed to make sure that we're getting there. And then on the flip side, if your business isn't expecting revenue to grow significantly, but is it, essentially expecting it to stay flat or to level off year over year, there may be less focus on adding new expenses in these categories or new hires in these categories, but instead there'll be a focus on reducing costs and making these teams more efficient. So where you actually might end up spending dollars in this type of a situation is maybe on your IT and development side, because you might want to implement a new system that might cost you more today, but is going to make your teams more efficient and therefore make you be able to work in a more lean manner or more cost-effective manner in future years. So once we have kind of these three buckets, your revenue, your fixed costs, and your variable costs nailed down, you kind of get an understanding of where your earnings are going to shake out for the year. And the calculation for earnings is your revenues less your fixed and variable costs, and then that gets you down to earnings. And again, we'll go into a whole deep dive on the P&L in part 4 of this series. You'll get plenty of that from me then. So what these three items really also help you determine, it similar into your personal finances, are your cash needs for the year. So revenue is a cash generator, and your budget will need to take into consideration when the business will expect to receive cash related to each sale. So is there a new large contract that's coming in that has an annual fee that's paid upfront, or will that annual fee be paid monthly or over time? What are the payment terms? Are they 30, 60, or 90-day payment terms? When it comes to sales, businesses tend to want to receive their fees upfront with the shortest payment terms as possible to accelerate the cash flow into the company. And then conversely, your expenses are cash outflows. And businesses tend to want to hold on to their cash as long as they can. So they want their contracts with their vendors to allow fees to be paid over time instead of upfront. And they want to negotiate the longest payment terms that they can. And it's all of these different decisions. They really do play a very important part in understanding the cash flows of the business, and they really help frame the budget for the year. Knowing when your cash is going in and coming out will really help you make better decisions on the timing of some of the variable expenses that you're considering in the budget. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked through some of the components of the budget, let's talk through the process. There are two main methods for creating a budget: the top-down method and the bottom-up method. All right, so now that we've talked through the different components of the budget, let's talk through how it actually all works. So there are two main methods for creating a budget. There's the top-down method and the bottom-up method. In the top-down method, the business determines what the top-line growth and/or earnings will be for the business. And based on these targets, they fill in the variable expenses as needed to kind of get to the desired result. With this method, there is very little involvement for the unit leaders that will ultimately be responsible for managing the budget. In the bottom-up method, the businesses provide each of the units that are responsible for managing the budget an opportunity to submit what they think that their units' inflows and outflows will be for the year. And then these individual budgets are all kind of aggregated and reviewed to see if they result in the desired outcome for the company. So when working in this method, it's really good for managers to have in mind what their need to haves, what their absolute musts are in terms of the budget, and then also what their nice to haves are. And this way, if when you send in the budget and it's all aggregated and there needs to be additional cuts made, it's very easy for both the business and those managers to make decisions about what can be removed or what can be kind of pushed out until later in the year. And then also, as a unit manager preparing a budget, it's a good rule of thumb to have a project plan for the year that really supports your expense asks. So it's really hard for you to just kind of walk in with a budget and that says that you're going to grow your team by 25% without really having a business case that supports it. So laying out all of the whys behind your budget really helps the business understand the potential upside of the asks that you're looking for, and that helps lead them to make more informed decisions. So if you are very prepared and you've done your homework and you can really show them how these new things that you're asking for in the budget will actually help pay for themselves over time and or make the company additional money over time, it really makes it a lot easier for the company to approve those and kind of roll with your decisions versus somebody who really hasn't done their homework and is just saying, I just need it. We won't be able to get through without it. So with both of these methods, there are certainly some pros and cons. And due to that fact, I actually kind of work in a hybrid of the two, where we always do have in mind, what we want our numbers to shake out at. We've got that starting point that we're striving for. But we also do provide each of the managers an opportunity to make adjustments to what our starting point is for each of their units, so that they have a little bit more involvement in the process. And it definitely involves some back and forth, and that takes some time and can be a little bit frustrating and maybe draws out the budget process a bit more. But I really feel like they're having some level of collaboration with the folks that are ultimately responsible for managing the budgets is an incredibly important step in ensuring that they're motivated to help you carry out the goals of the company. It's also really important that all the folks that are involved in creating and managing the budget really understand and are bought in on what the company's strategy for the year is. So, is the strategy to grow your top line revenue? If so, like what resources are needed to get you there? If bottom line growth, if you're growing your earnings is your target, will that be achieved through top line growth, like getting a second job or putting in launching a new product line? Or is that going to be accomplished by reducing your expenses? Or are we going to try to combine the two? So once all your budgets have been created and distributed, it's great to make sure that you have an understanding of both the upside and downside potentials of this. So another way of saying that is, what are some additional opportunities that you didn't plan for in the budget? And what are some risks that you didn't plan for in the budget that might cause it to swing either up or down? So for example, is there a line of revenue that is budgeted that's going to help you significantly grow your business that's purely based on landing one specific new client for the year? And if that's the case, it's really good to have a contingency plan so that you understand what happens if that contract actually happens to fall through. And then there's also budget risks that you can't plan for, with things like a global pandemic like we're in today. And in these situations, it's really important for businesses to be agile and to just make adjustments needed on the fly, or even do a reforecast, so that you can make sure that the business has the resources needed to continue to sustain when they're kind of thrown these crazy curveballs. So as someone who manages a budget, it's incredibly important to maintain an understanding of how you're performing against the budget throughout the year, whether it's each month or quarterly, and not just how you've done in that individual month or quarter as a silo, but really cumulatively how you're doing throughout the year. Knowing if you're running above or behind budget really helps you in your decision-making process. So if there are areas that you're over budget, is there something that you can do to kind of help offset there? Is there a new client you can try to land, or are there some expenses you can cut to try to get you back on track? Or is the business comfortable with you being over budget because they've recognized that the things that got you there are going to help them in a future period? And then on the flip side, if there's a lot of cushion in the budget, maybe that's an opportunity for you to try something new and take a shot at launching a new product or going to a conference that you haven't been before to see if you can get some potential upside growth based off of those things as well. All right, so you guys have kind of heard me babble on quite a bit here. So what I'd like to do is really kick off more of a Q&A type session with both Andrea and Dorothy. So Andrea is kind of coming to us from the business side, where she works in account management And I actually work with Andrea. So she's certainly a part of that hybrid model of top down, bottom up budgeting, where we provide for her what we think her team will need for the year based off of the growth that we've planned. And she kind of works with us to help make adjustments that she knows she's going to need to be successful. And then on the flip side, Dorthy works on the accounting team. So she's an integral part of making sure that the business really understands how they're performing throughout the year by providing different reporting and different feedback so that they understand, hey, this is what we expected, this is what we've done so far, and it can really help them make decisions. All right, so to kick off that Q&A session, my first question for these two ladies is, we've got this understanding of the different focuses of a company, that what those focuses might be for the year, whether we're going to accelerate our top line growth or we're focusing on bottom line growth or earnings. So for both of you, what are some ways that you've seen your teams, what are some of the things that you've seen your teams do to help the companies achieve these goals?
Sure, I can go first. So a couple of things that I look at when I'm looking at top line growth in our budget is, what does our current pipeline look like? What business are we getting from our existing accounts that we know we're going to get in the next year? And then what's our new business pipeline look like? And I think, Nicole, you mentioned it earlier, do new contracts bring in business right away, or do you sign a new contract and then you have to pull it in over several months? So it really depends on your sales cycle too. So kind of in our business, we get commitments from clients and then we have to do the work and the implementation plan to pull all that business through. So I may look at our pipeline and our new business sales and say, hey, it may take us a couple more months to get to this goal or achieve this outcome. So I look at it a couple different ways, kind of that existing business and then our new business pipeline.
You said pipeline a few times, and I mentioned it earlier on too. So what is it that you mean when you refer to a pipeline?
So I look at our history with our clients. What referrals are they bringing to the table today? What different levers or implementations or strategies can we put in place to pull new business with those existing clients? And then what does our new business pipeline look like? So what clients are we looking to start a new relationship with? Have we sized those clients? Do we know how much business they might have that we're going to achieve, in a contract or in a relationship to pull those in? So I think a pipeline is really our existing business and then new business opportunities. And then for our business, that would be referrals and then referrals into members. But for other businesses, it may be a little bit more quicker to the transaction. So you may get a referral for nurse case management. You may get a referral for DME or an MRI. And those things are quicker to convert to business and more transactional in a faster way.
Awesome, thank you. So as you kind of are figuring out your pipeline, whether it's your existing clients or these new clients that you're going to bring on, how do you think about prioritizing the opportunities?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to when I think about prioritizing the opportunities, it kind of goes back to a sizing exercise. What do we need to do to achieve those goals? Do we need to, bring on additional staff that will help us make the outreach and do the education with the clients to bring in the new business opportunities? Things like that.
Perfect. And, when you're also thinking about your pipeline, especially when it comes to either growing existing clients significantly or bringing in new business, how does that kind of tie into your involvement in the budgeting process in terms of figuring out what your staffing needs are?
Yeah, so I think it also goes back to your sales cycle and knowing your sales cycle and knowing what opportunities and things you have in your pipeline. So when I think about our budget and budgeting in the past, how long do we think it's going to achieve, X amount of referrals? When we get to that point, do we need to bring on additional staff to help, achieve those referrals and pull them through? So I think about it in terms of the sales cycle and then what strategies we know that work to pull the rest of the business through. And then I look at our staffing models from that. Is that 2 additional heads? Is that 1 additional head? Is that, and by head, I mean FTE, but how many different positions do we know need to bring in? Do we need to bring in a senior person that costs a little bit more money? Do we need to bring in more of a associate level person who can help us achieve the same outcomes? So it's a little bit of a balance of knowing what your core business is doing today and knowing what you need to achieve, your future goals.
Yeah, and these types of, these type of staffing needs or expense needs are, they fall into that variable expense bucket. And it's really important to understand, like within an account management team like Andrea manages, each of her people actually are revenue generators in and of themselves. So in order to make, when they're making decisions about whether or not you hire somebody, sometimes hiring or not hiring that person means potential added revenue or lost revenue for the business. So they are really important decisions to make. And it's also important to make sure that, when you're thinking through your teams, whether it's an account management team or even on the operations side, the folks that are servicing the products or the clients, making sure that you are never at a position where all of your existing staff are at their full capacity. You want to always make sure that there's room and that you're hiring in advance of your expected growth. Awesome. So we've kind of talked a little bit about like what we're calling existing clients and then what we're calling our new development. So we often hear this phrase tossed around, organic growth. What does this mean for each of you in your respective roles? So we've heard a little bit from Andrea, so maybe I'll toss that one over to Dorothy.
Yeah, so organic growth, in our business is our core workers' comp. And the organic growth at one call or just in any company can grow over time, right? So it can evolve from what it is today, but 5 years from now, your business may have new products. And now maybe your new core organic growth is your core set of business. So for us, it's all of our workers' comp products. But let's say we get into something new like group health, that's now our other piece of business. So our core products that we're in, but again, when I started, right, we were coming together as one company. So the products back, our organic growth 7 years ago was a little different. Our product base was a little different than what we're at now. So focusing on the core business would be, can we still grow the core business or that organic piece, or do we need to keep, looking somewhere else for new business? So really just that core growth.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you made too. So your definition of what organic is within your own company actually might change over time. So it might end up being your organic growth is, revenue that you experience from an entire market segment, or it could be revenue that you experience from a specific set of clients or a specific set of products, and that might shift over time. Andrea, what does it mean to you within your budgeting process?
Sure. So organic growth, what it means to me within my budgeting process and on my team is really looking at our core group of clients that bring in the most opportunity. What's the baseline of that? And I call that, the organic piece. And what are we going to bring in addition to that? And then I think of new business opportunities as our non-organic growth. So what are we going to do to go out and maybe do a different strategy or a different process to get in new business opportunities from clients that we don't work with today?
Perfect. So kind of along those same lines of organic growth within our budgeting process or your different budgeting processes, how do you guys think about the balance between growing your organic business and new business development?
Yeah, so in years past and in my current role, I think you think of your organic as your kind of your baseline, and then what do you need to do to achieve those new opportunities? So is that bringing in additional resources that may have relationships that that they can bring in new business opportunities? I think you mentioned going to conferences. If you went to this conference or you sponsored this event or you took some of your budget and reallocated it to something else, does that have the return on investment that you think it's going to have? Do you bring on these new opportunities? You mentioned, and in sales, you are revenue generating. So, back to my other point, if you have someone who does have relationships and can bring in new business, that's an opportunity there. Or if you start to think about where you could shift some of your budget to go expose yourself to a different kind of client or a different kind of revenue source, all of that kind of ties into making those choices.
Yeah, and then the support from the accounting, and then the support from the, from our reporting accounting team to show like everything that you're hoping has a return on investment, being able to show that with the numbers, right? So that's kind of the piece where the non-revenue generating people add value, right? Is making sure that there's a lot of visibility to what you think and expect the growth to come from. So are we growing our base business? Are we growing the new products that you're into, and really giving detailed reporting in a way that makes sense and is timely, right? I mean, you want to have the information if you think something's happening and you have reporting to support that you have that also as like a backup to that something's working or something's not working.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, similar to you, Dorothy, I'm on that kind of back end supporting role. And, throughout the course of the year, as it is with most companies, there are entire teams that are focused purely on providing that type of reporting out to the sales folks or the account managers or those budget owners, so that they really understand how their performance is tracking throughout the year, so that when they get to the point, for us, it's in Q4 where they're going to have to start doing some planning for the future. They're very well educated on, what they've been able to accomplish so far, what their misses have been, and then what some of their successes have been as well. And it really just helps frame that whole conversation. And really within your organic business, you can actually, sometimes those two things can get molded together. So if you look at your organic business as business from a group of core clients, and you might think that, your business from those core clients is essentially at its full potential, where you're getting everything you're going to get. So you're essentially just expecting, at least you don't want it to trail off year over year, but you're not expecting it to grow. Something that you can often do is actually introduce new products into those existing clients. So you're essentially bringing in a new business, a new product line, but really not having to expand that far beyond your existing client base as well. So that's another way to use what you have to kind of drive some new business development as well. So on that kind of same vein, new business opportunities will present ourselves throughout the year. And I kind of mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation that sometimes the budget is looked at as this tool that just gives the CFO the ability to just say no all the time. And I kind of hear the joke a lot that I'm not really a CFO, I'm the CFNO. And that's really not the truth. So one of the very important things to understand about budgets is that they can't be rigid. And although we all want to make sure that we're achieving our goals for the year, you have to be flexible to make shifts that are going to be beneficial for the company. You may not see those benefits right away. You might not see them until 6 or 12 or sometimes even further on out after that budget period ends, but you have to stay flexible. So some of the things that kind of lead to that CFNO perception is when there's a new thing that pops up that might have kind of a hefty price tag attached to it. So how do you both determine when you're presented with these types of opportunities that have a cost that was unplanned for, unbudgeted for, how do you guys determine whether or not you should move forward with that particular thing?
Sure. So I think it goes hand in hand with Dorothy's mentioning of reporting. So I would go, to our reporting team. I would say, what do we look like for the year? Are we ahead of our targets? Are we lagging in our targets? And then I would look at really, what is that return on investment for this opportunity? And I would do my homework, because obviously I'd have to present this to my boss and our CFNO. So I would have to say, what do I need to do from a homework perspective to really paint this picture and provide the data to take it to my higher ups to say, this is why this is important. It's going to add this much referral volume. It's going to do this for our client relationships. And then in turn, it may even have an impact on our members. So I really also like to think of it in looking at our strategic goals. So does this opportunity that's being presented align with our strategic goals? Will we have to take some budget from somewhere else to fund this, things like that. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I think it's always good to check in to see where you are trending for the year, whether that be for the quarter, whether that be for, the first couple months of the year, really looking to see, are you behind? Are you accelerated? Do you have a little cushion there? and then what opportunities would this new venture, let's call it, bring to the table, that you can really present the goals and the mission to the people who would need to approve that.
And then Dorothy, from the kind of internal or support type role, how are you kind of assisting the Andreas of the world in making these decisions?
Oh yeah, so I mean that's kind of our, the big value is making sure that, there's accurate, timely reporting. I mean that's kind of like the buzzwords of accounting, but really, I mean, how important that is to have something that gives you clear information of where you are. A lot of what we do is either trend reporting of, right, if budgets are based off of a 3-month run rate from 6 months ago, why is that now different? Because even if you are behind, there could be a reason you're behind, but maybe you do still need to try that new venture to be able to offset some of that. And maybe it's again, like Andrea said, over the strategic plan, maybe it's not something that'll happen this year, but next year it's going to, rolling. So really making sure that if things, any variances are, double clicking, I'll use that, it's a little buzzword that we, so double clicking into something and really making sure if you had budgeted an X% for margin, if it's off, is there a mix issue? Is there products changed? Is there looking at just the different areas of where any variances are actually coming from too. So, not just looking at it, oh, we're off versus budget. Well, why are you off versus budget? Is it a customer mix issue? Is it a product? Some of those things that we planned for a 3-month run rate, and now that customer is not with us anymore, but we have some other customers that have better margins. Now their volume has gone up. So you're just really getting into the whys, things are above and beyond, so that it can help support, if Andrea does have another thing she wants to do. And then again, sometimes you can have stuff on your plate and then something changes, like COVID and things that happen. You can have 10 things and a couple people have to switch because in different roles, and what you have are kind of like on a pathway for changes. And so, like you said, to be agile and not so, be ready for the changes. We just had this happen where there was kind of like all these great ideas for all these new hefty plans, and 10 has now turned into 4, and they're completely different. The 4 important ones are completely different than 60 days ago. So really just being ready for, okay, well then let's look at it this way, and being flexible and really just assisting with any of the reporting data side, and making sure that aligns with everything.
Yeah, that's perfect. And we've used the term ROI now a few times, I think, within the last couple of minutes. So just to kind of take a quick step back on that. So what ROI stands for is your return on investment. So and there's going to be an entire session, coming up in April, where we talk through how to make decisions based off of ROI. But essentially what that is it really just tells you this opportunity that you want to embark on. How long will it take you to kind of get your money back, or will you get your money back on that particular investment? So, if we're talking about adding a new conference, or adding this brand new conference that pops up, or even throwing maybe your own internal conference, and it was completely unbudgeted for, really being able to put together a comprehensive business plan that lays out, like, these are all of the costs that will be associated with this particular project. This is who's going to go to the conference, or who we're going to invite to the conference. Here's what the potential business opportunity is within each of those different clients. And here's what I think it'll generate. And here's the time period over which I think it will generate that business. That really helps the business help you make that decision. So it's not about necessarily, it's not budgeted, we can't do it. It's not budgeted. Let's see if there's room for it, because we want to make sure that we're not passing up opportunities that can help grow the business in the future. I also think it's important to note too that not every opportunity that presents itself will necessarily have like a very clear intrinsic or tangible value to it. There might be some opportunities that pop up that you won't be able to directly say, hey, I will make my money back on this because I'm going to bring in X number of clients. How do you guys kind of think through those type of decisions when it's not so clear or your crystal ball is a little bit foggier in terms of the direct value that that particular thing will bring in?
Yeah, I think it goes back to earlier when I mentioned, sizing an opportunity, doing your homework, finding out, what the best plan you can put together for an ROI. But I think to your point, Nicole, there is intrinsic value in certain things. So, it comes to mind a couple years ago, we had a client who wasn't doing a ton of business with us, but they were a really good advocate for us, a really good speaker on our behalf, was really tied into the workers' comp community and introduced us to a lot of different other clients that brought in new business opportunities. So maybe it didn't totally give us a return right away, but over time, through our support of this client and their initiatives, we were able to bring other new business opportunities in. So I do think there's somewhat of an intrinsic portion to it, and it is maybe a little bit hard to articulate that or explain that to someone who you may need to get approval for. But I think just laying out that plan and laying out, what you think you're going to be able to do from that opportunity is how I look at it. And then if we think about new conferences and things like that, or being asked to attend a conference or sponsor a conference. Sometimes we get asked to sponsor things often that maybe weren't budgeted for, really thinking about who is going to attend that conference. Is there someone who's been on our target list that we know is involved in that conference and that opportunity? And by sponsoring or attending, we can get an audience with that person and then take it from there to, get started with the sales process.
Yeah, so those are all really great points, Andrea. And, there's this magic that kind of goes behind it where, okay, you're going to do this thing. You have a general understanding of what you think the potential might be. Something that businesses sometimes struggle actually with still today is, how do I now track that opportunity to understand whether or not that value, whether or not we actually end up getting that intrinsic or even direct value? So what are some different ways that you've seen companies approach kind of tracking these new opportunities?
Yeah, so I've seen it done a couple different ways using different CRM tools, using a Salesforce, for example, tracking all of those opportunities. What referrals did you get out of that conference, or new business leads did you get out of that conference, and then measuring them over time. Did they come to fruition? Did you get business from that client? I've seen Salesforce used in that way to track, all the leads, all the contacts, then building steps from that. Did you do outreach? Did you set up a second meeting? Things like that. So I've seen it done that way before. And then I've also seen where, you look at your baseline of what clients were you interacting with at that conference, or sometimes you do get the opportunity, if you are shifting into different products or shifting into different markets, it's easier to track that way because you have a clean slate of, I didn't have this before, and now I'm going to, go after group health or liability or something like that. So you kind of have a better understanding of, like, we were doing nothing here, and then we put a little bit of resources and things towards those markets, and then we built them, and grew them from there.
Yeah, you said a couple of really important things within there. And I think one of them, and it's, part of Dorothy's job too, is understanding what your baseline is before you go into, embark on these different opportunities. So if I know that all these different clients are going to be there, it's really important to understand going into that. All right, today I'm getting X number of referrals from these folks, and really kind of memorializing that particular baseline so that you really can start to understand, because it does get fuzzy when it's not a brand new product or a brand new market. And that establishing that baseline can really kind of help you understand what value that thing actually added. I have one more kind of question for you, which it kind of makes me laugh a little bit, but I mentioned a crystal ball being blurry earlier, so I'll throw it out there for both of you guys. As you're putting together your budgets and, establishing your pipeline or determining, what things it is you're going to do they all happen the way that you expected them to happen? And if they do, awesome for you. If they don't, what do you do to adjust there? Do you just kind of leave it be, or how do you shift your decision-making process at that point to kind of realign your, or re-strategize kind of mid-year?
Do you want to? Okay, yeah, go for it.
So I think and again, from my perspective is more on the reporting side and being able to show that. So I may be repeating myself a little bit, but when things aren't quite happening as we had planned, and for us, I feel like they never happen as we planned. So I'm always ready for whatever changes are coming down, or again, I spoke to the 10 projects. That literally is a real thing. This just happened last week, that our 10 projects turned into 4, and the 4 that are not the 4 that I even heard of. So it's just being ready for that. And okay, so now it's different. So let's figure out how, kind of not necessarily start over, be able to just pivot from, okay, this is our new piece that we're going to focus on. We budgeted this customer to have growth. Oh, by the way, we didn't realize we were now second position and there's no growth at all. So, how do we adjust for that? Do we go at it again? Just trying to really make sure that whatever we're seeing, and this is the biggest piece, is if something doesn't quite make sense to what we've seen, right? If you've been in the role for a while, in my case, I have, when something's changing. So just making sure the people that need to know that something doesn't quite pass the smell test, that you're getting that reporting over to them. And I mean, that's been so important to something doesn't seem right. Like, I know we planned for this and now something has changed. Flat rates are up versus, again, getting into not just saying, oh, the margin's down because this customer's volume went down. Well, is that really the real story? Making sure if something doesn't quite jive in your head, that you're double looking into things. And that's really been beneficial in our role in our group, that being able to provide that support to the Andreas of the world, and even to you, Nicole, so you have some of the actuals that have happened to support where, the finance team was looking. So hopefully that's answers.
Yeah.
And I would say too, and it is kind of funny to say crystal ball and the crystal ball being a little bit fuzzy. I would say as a younger, probably 10, 15 years ago, when I was starting out and was asked to, how is your territory going to perform? How are your clients going to perform? And you sit there and think, gee, person who's asking me this, how do I know? And you get kind of defensive, like, why are they asking these questions? Why do I need to present this? Like, I'm a good salesperson, don't ask me. So I think, and it's fair, like this whole budgeting process is a fair exercise to go through. I've learned over time, you really have to think about what you do know. What do you know about your clients? If you are working with a lot of TPAs, they may shift their clients a little bit. So does that shift your referrals a little bit? Or does this TPA may lose this business, but another TPA is going to pick it up? So you need to go make sure that you're part of that, implementation plan. What RFPs do you know are coming out and up for renewal this year? What new strategies or new products do you have as a salesperson to bring to those clients to grow those referrals? So it is interesting. You do have a lot of information at your fingertips if you go do your research, and then you may have to pivot. So maybe you do launch a new product, and I think it speaks to whether maybe you have a very mature business or maybe you're part of a startup. I find that startups are a little bit quicker to say, like, let's try this new thing, fail fast, learn lessons, and then move on, where more mature businesses may not have the appetite to go try new things and fail fast. So I always like to try new things, see if it works. Pilots are great. Try it for 90 days, measure it, learn what you can, and then, take it into your next project of lessons learned.
Yeah, that's perfect. And, I guess to kind of wrap it all up, essentially, when we're starting off the budget process at the, end of the prior year, there is a lot of guesswork that goes into it, but it's somewhat supported by data, right? And the most important things to remember about the budgeting process is that it really is there as a guide so that everybody has a general understanding of what the company's strategic plan is for the year. So are we trying to bring a lot more earnings down to the bottom line? Are we trying to accelerate our top line growth? or are we trying to maintain? And at least having an understanding of those general categories really helps frame your decision making throughout the year. And I've been doing this for quite some time now, and I will tell you right now that I've never hit a budget to the penny ever. And if I ever do, I'm going to play the mega bucks that same day, because that would be the most amazing thing ever. And in reality, we're typically off budget, whether it's better or less by, at least the margin of 10+%, because there are so many unknowns that pop up. And it's incredibly important to make sure that you're adjusting the business for those unknowns. And it's also really important. So it's not a negative thing. And I think the budgets that really, or the companies that are the most successful with this whole budgeting and planning process are the ones that kind of approach it from a collaborative standpoint, are open-minded and are flexible, and have that agility to make sure that you're making decisions throughout the year that are going to either benefit the company today, or being open-minded enough to recognize that they might benefit the company tomorrow. And I love what you said about failing fast, Andrea, because it's also incredibly important that you don't see missing a budget as a failure, and you also don't shy away from opportunities because you're afraid that they might not pan out the way that you thought they did, that your crystal ball was inaccurate. What's important about trying new things is being able to fail fast and just making sure that there was something that was learned from that particular thing, and always being able to take away some sort of a positive from it. So with that, I want to thank you both so much for joining me for this. That way you all didn't have to just listen to me kind of talk at you. And I think it's really important for folks too to be able to hear different perspectives of the budgeting process, so that they really can start to understand that, it really isn't just this set rigid thing that is meant to, drive every decision that the business makes, but instead it's meant to have an open-ended back and forth conversation throughout the course of the year for the business. So thank you both so much.
Oh yeah, thank you.